Yeah, I just realized they downgraded my account somehow. We actually are paying for this, and my webcam's off. Okay, sorry about that. So please, Jeremy, let's start the conversation and the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get started. Let me do desktop too. Can everybody see my desktop? Give me a big old thumbs up.
Yep.
Sweet. All right. As mentioned before, feel free to use the chat and ask any questions. Damien will help monitor that. If it's super pressing, just shout out, talk to me. I want to hear you from you guys. Damien is going to mute you just to start with. So hi everybody, I'm Jeremy. This is a continuation of last week's talk. So before we get into that, to introduce the new people here. Jeremy, I'm for the community manager and front-end tech lead at Cognizant Soft Vision. I host meetups. Last week was Palm Beach JavaScript, and this week is Boca.js. This is presented by Damien and myself. We're co-organizers here. I run a nonprofit organization called Code Palm Beach, where we're dedicated to teaching kids to code. This talk is largely all about my work there and what I'm trying to do with that, specifically the technology side in that context. You can follow me at Twitter, GitHub, and the Beach Tech Slack channel. I'm at Germbo. And if you want to see the slides, github.com/Germbo/talks. If you're not familiar with Palm Beach Tech and the Slack channel, please feel free to sign up and get into the Slack channel. It is a very active developer community. There's a developer channel. If you have a question about coding, just post it up there. I guarantee you there's someone there willing to help and answer the question. If someone posts a question that you may be able to help answer, it's a great way to give back to the community. Just have a fun conversation up there. There's also, if you want to know what's going on in the Palm Beach County and this, Broward County areas, the events channel is a very active forum as well for all the things that are going on in that context. So palmbeachtech.org/Slack, fill out the information and catch us on the Slack channel. Like I said, this is a continuation of the last talk that I've given, where I introed what Strapi is, what a headless CMS is, and what the whole Jamstack idea is. During that talk, I challenged everyone to kind of think outside the blog when you're thinking about a headless CMS. Today, I want to discuss how I'm utilizing the power and building the full-fledged Jamstack application, complete with views, authentication, CRUD, and highly interactive user interfaces, all with two technologies, Strapi being my backend and Svelte being my front end. The application number 2 is called Typer. History. Before we can talk about how Typer and Strapi kind of are a match made in heaven, I think it's important to understand where this has come from and why I felt compelled in the first place to talk about or to build this tool. So Typer V1. Typer is a tool, it's simple to help kids learn to type, right? The kids nowadays are from the iPad generation or the iPhone generation, where they see a keyboard, but it's kind of split. It's not the normal keyboard that you're used to. Hitting special characters and figuring out where things are on the keyboard is difficult. So this started off with one simple screen, some HTML and an explanation of what was shown. And then a blinking cursor was on there, and as the user typed, the user got some indication whether what they were doing was correct or not. Either it would flash red that you got it wrong, or it would highlight green and encourage you to keep going. Once you finish a particular line, it would render that HTML out on the page to give you a sense of what you just typed actually does something in the DOM. Right? So this is kind of what it looked like. Phones, plain and simple. I just wanted to get it out and get my idea on paper. So as I talked about, that green highlight is the user who has completed the line. Since this is still image, you don't see a blinking cursor, or something wrong, you don't see the red flashing there, but this is highly interactive, gives them immediate feedback as to what's going on. And as you click next, you go through a lesson of 10 or so. Like the lesson is kind of arbitrary at this particular point in time. So Typer, 1.5. This got me thinking a little bit. As I was creating this tool to teach kids to type, can I teach HTML and CSS while teaching to type at the same time, right? Two birds, one stone, right? HTML, CSS, and typing. Okay. 1.5 comes along. There are a couple things that need to be in order to take this thing to the next level. Some of the items I needed to figure out was things like multi-lesson support. Right now, everything was on the same line, as we saw in the depending on the screen size, if the word wrapped in a weird way, like if the last caret of the tag was on the new line, things kind of broke and it didn't allow the user to move forward. I thought it would be important if multi-line lessons had a mini-map of sort as well that more reflected what the index.html might look like versus you just randomly typing out one line at a time. So mini-maps of the HTML and CSS would be a nice feature to have. Progress tracking is another thing. Did you complete the lesson and how do you move forward? What lesson to do next and whatnot. So Typer 1.5. After playing around with some styles and rethinking architecture, I landed on V1.5. Right, so this was a complete rebuild using Svelte. It's a technology that was relatively new to me at the time. This got me there, right? You can hardly see it, but there's a green cursor behind the first caret, and that's blinking to indicate to the user that type something. This is where you start. And then as you type it out, the same effect would happen where in this plain white area over here, as you typed out the largest heading, HTML over here, it would show up there. And then you would get a mini map. So trying to figure out where everything would go. I'm liking the layout here. I like the functionality of you type out something, you render it, and then you see the HTML and CSS. And then as a little bonus, you have an explanation of what you're seeing on the screen. So I'm thinking this could be something, right? We can take it to the next level. So as I mentioned, this is Svelte under the hood. And the reason why I chose Svelte is because this allowed me to keep most of my logic, but it also provided a component-based architecture and a universal store. I had tried these things, or typing this particular app in React and Vue. And some of the stuff that I wanted to do with it, it was just hard to accomplish, right? Because I'm looking to event listeners, like when the user types a key, and I kept memory leaks and infinite listeners, and Svelte no barrier, had no barrier to that window key listener. And when I first learned about Svelte, I read the documentation, and it had an example of key binding. As you pressed it, it would show the letter you pressed. And 2 hours later, I had the working prototype up, and then the screen that I showed. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. The screen right here. This the first version I've built of this was in 2 hours, and then a weekend later, 8 hours later, I had a fully fledged working application that you see here. And that's one of the main reasons why I went behind Svelte. Even though it was still relatively new to me, it gave me all the power I needed. All right, so version 2. While version 1 was great, this showed me that this tool was useful, right? The kids were really utilizing it. They loved it because the feedback was instant, and the students felt like they were accomplishing something. Even though they didn't have anything to take home at the end of the day, they saw the result as they typed something out and then saw it render on the page. They were starting to feel a sense of accomplishment, which is great. I utilize this in my lessons for like a warm up, and my justification behind that is my background. When I was in high school and early career, I'm an artist. So nice day, what did I do? I would warm up. I would draw a whole bunch, just random little sketches. I would do blending exercises. I would do color tests and other things like that just to warm up, just to get into the mood of drawing. And I feel like the same thing. I teach my students to just get familiar with the keyboard, get that muscle memory down, learn where your hands go and where the keys are by feel, not by looking. A lot of students are just, using their index finger, just hunting and pecking around the keyboard. But another side thing about this that I notice as the same room with the students and their parents is I noticed parents trying this while their kids were moving on to today's lessons. There are times where we didn't have packed sessions, and the parents would sit next to their child, and while the student was learning HTML and CSS, the parents would pull it up on their computer and start with Typer, and just to get a more feel for HTML and CSS. And a couple of them have actually reached out and started learning HTML and CSS. Like, where do I go from here? So that's pretty cool. I didn't intend that to happen, but this shows me that it's not only useful for students, but all, or I'm sorry, kids, so adults. So a refresh. I gave it a repaint. I figured out the logic for doing the multi-line, and started under the hood using Svelte with a proper router. So now this gave me the ability to separate the web lessons from typing. Because I was thinking about it, and if I'm typing random characters on a screen, why can't those random characters be typing lessons as well? Like songs to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or SpongeBob, or just general typing. This is a tool that can really be used for either or. The logic is practically identical from the lessons and the typing lesson. The difference is the typing lesson, I don't render anything because you're typing it out on the page already. So some of the features of V2 that are particularly notable is the pulling of data from a live API. So the lessons that they get access to is pulled from a RESTful endpoint. So as we create more, they pull from the API and they have a new lesson to play around with. Offline support by storing data in local storage. This was a huge key for me because I wanted the ability to take it where the internet was spotty, or if they happen to be offline for whatever reason, they can still use it. So this isn't a full PWA, but a lot of ideas go into that. It's just caching the information in local storage so that way they can play around with it. Tracking progress is also done via local storage in this particular version. This isn't tied to any particular user, so it's all based on the machine that you're on. If you'd finished lesson one was updated to say, hey, I'm done now, and have a little green check mark. So it gave the user a sense of progress. Centralized stores. Anybody who's used Angular, React, or Vue knows the complexity of passing data from parent to child, child to child, and then passing that information up, and then playing around with that data in other components that need it. Vue out of the box has a centralized store that allowed me to create a centralized place for my web lessons, and then any place that needed it, it utilized it. So I didn't have to pull in a third-party library. It was baked in and good to go. And then routes. Routes in Svelte is a little iffy, is a little weird because there's no definitive, like, here's how you do routes. And there's about 5 or 6 that are all okay. The one that I landed on, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is not the version of V2. I was looking at another example, and the routes that were in there solved the problems I needed for that time. So that's why I chose Svelte, and it's been good to me so far. And then, so with routes, as I mentioned too, we got dedicated general typing section. Okay, things are great in version 2. I'm loving where this is going. But my mind keeps racing with all the possibilities. If I can do all the stuff that I just talked about, what else can I do with it? The admin area would be crucial for this, so that way I can create lessons on the fly, or if I notice a typo in something, I can log into the admin area and fix it, and have a student just refresh their page. They keep their progress, but now they have the updated information. So that would be great. Some anonymous user, being that we're dealing with great children here, I don't want any personal information out there that the student progress something without asking. So the idea I have in place here is to generate a random ID, red car 777, assign that to that particular student, and that's how I track. That's what I'm tracking there. And things it'd be nice to enhance the system with would be things like personalization, right? How do I customize this? Like, I want to change my difficulty setting. If I prefer dark theme versus light theme. You know, how do I persist these information other than on your local machine? You know, with the anonymous tracking and user stats, I'm thinking of like, how many characters did you get right? Like, what was your longest correct character combo? What was your time for that lesson? You know, so this way we can display that information on for that user, and this kind of gamifies it a little bit too. So if you took 5 minutes to complete lesson 1, come back and try to beat it. See if you can get faster typing and do that lesson again under 5 minutes. If you only get 10 characters in a row correct, what's the largest number of correct string number of correct characters can you make? Yeah, and so all these things would be great for, you know, enhancing the system and gaining replayability is what I'm looking for there. Now, this is where Strapi comes in, right? And another re-architecture, right? So we've talked about, I started this in vanilla JS, the first version, and I needed to use Svelte in there, so that was a little re-architecture there. 2.5, in order to get to the place that I want to go, I need to do a little bit of re-architecture here. So here's a preview of what 2.5 looks like. If you notice, I have a settings, which is in addition to the web lessons and typing lessons. And then all the way to the right, you'll notice I have an admin area and a logout. The page that we're looking at now is the typing lesson admin, where I could add a new, or I click the view icon where I can full cred. I can anything about it, or I can delete it if necessary. Right? So that's pretty cool. So for me, what Strapi really offer, right? Because what we talked about last class, what we talked about last meetup is Strapi CMS. And when people think of CMS, they think of blogs, right? They think of some sort of brochure website or some sort of blog that's displaying just information. So what does Strapi offer us? Well, a lot. RESTful APIs and a visual builder is what really sets this particular tool or version of CMSs apart, the headless CMS. And I think Strapi has done one of the better jobs of allowing me to create RESTful APIs with this visual builder. In my last mention, this is like plugins that I would always have to install into any Word custom post types and advanced custom fields. You have default posts. Well, if I'm building a particular website that the content doesn't necessarily fit that particular architecture structure, well, custom post types allows me to create what that is for that client. You know, for example, it's not a post. I'm building a movie database. Well, in WordPress, I can create a content type called movies, and then the fields into that are specific to the movie genre, right, or the movie category. So I need to enhance how I do that. It's the advanced custom fields. Visual Builder are those two things out of the box, and that's amazing. Once you create those, you get a full RESTful API with full cred. Permissions, right? Who has access to what? Who can do? Who can edit what, or who can delete what, or who can do what to what? Right? Those are pretty cool. And authentication. And the reason why this is separate is because I can utilize this to log into my application. Right? There is the admin, kind of like WordPress has an admin area. And then there's an authentication side of things, which is a user of the system. I'll talk more about that in a second.
Jeremy, before we continue, we do want to hear it, and we're having a little choppiness in the video. Can you stop your webcam?
Yes.
So hopefully that will help with the audio.
How's that sound? A little better?
Actually, it does. Go for it, my friend. Please continue. This is fascinating.
Very cool. RESTful APIs. All right, so out of the box, Strapi offered the ability to quickly create a RESTful API for all of the current features of Typer. Right, that was a huge win for me. With the Visual Builder, I've also been experimenting with the settings, with the admin area, with a couple of other places that I wanted to test out and see what it would take to get that done. Visual Builder has made that easy to iterate over. So the idea, the cycle of I get to test a product is a very tight loop in Strapi, right? So I love that about the RESTful what Strapi offers. The other beautiful thing about the Visual Builder is can easily create the form validation or the field validation. And all the most common validation that you would need is a simple text box or a checkbox away, right? So if you need a default value, what's that default value? Is this a required field? Check. Is this a unique field, meaning this can only be one in a particular database? Check, right? Is there a min length or a max length? Those are input fields of numbers that you can put in there. So any of the basic form validation is already done there for you. And if you extend it for any reason, documentation seems pretty clear. I haven't done any of that form advanced customization yet, but it seems pretty straightforward and seems pretty extendable. So roles, permissions, and authentication. Historically, this has been pretty difficult for me. You know, being I started off life as a designer, illustrator, moved over to photography, and then moved over to development. I tend to lean more toward the creative side of things. So when building backend systems, I can either log you in or log you out. You're either a super admin, have access to do everything, or you have no access and can't do anything. That's about as far as I can go. The access control layer historically been something that is pretty difficult for me. With Strapi, it's a matter of defining a role in an area and giving them the access via an ad interface. So if this particular role can only read and write their own content, boom, I can handle that. If you can only read stuff, I can handle it. So I'll walk you through the interface of where that is in a little bit, but this is one of the bigger reasons for me using Strapi. And then the authentication portion is a way for me to log in to my website and have route guards around that. And the JWT token, the verification, the email, that stuff is done via Strapi. All right, let's see some code already. Before we get into the code, I kind of want to just give you a demo of the new website. Right now, I am a non-logged in user. So we're seeing what the students will see. I go to web lessons, I click on web lessons, I start typing, boom, I see stuff happen, right? Now I've got to complete all 3 of these lines before I see anything out here. But if I were to continue this, it would render in this area to the right, and it would show me the HTML over here. And if I were to have any CSS, I would see CSS down there. Cool. I'm not going to finish typing out because as soon as someone watches me, I can't type. I don't know if that happens to other people, but that happens to me all the time.
Never, never at all.
Right?
Oh wait, I'm forgetting how to talk.
So in this this one is the just the general typing, right? And the idea behind this is just to get faster. My goal with this is to have a countdown timer and try to help you try to beat that time, show you a score multiplier for every correct character in a row, all sorts of good stuff. And then this is a work in progress. So you see that I've got a, if I'm already signed up here, what's my unique ID if I forget it? If I want to reset particular progress, how do I do that? If I want to switch from dark, how do I do that? Now, the more powerful part, in my opinion, is this admin area. So I've got a login page, login, and I get some validation right away that my username and password are incorrect. And then I see typing lessons or my web lesson. So this is after I'm logged in and I have authenticated to my Strapi URL. Let me pull up the Strapi server I've got running. So I had this running off in the back. These last 2 things right here, the first one was a 400, meaning not authorized. I didn't do it right. And then this local /auth, everything came back fine. So that's what it allowed me to log into the website. That's pretty cool. And now I can see the lesson that we see, the admin area. So like I mentioned, we can view the actions. I can test. I can create new lessons. If I update my lesson, come back here to typing. This is the lesson I created.
And just a reminder, everybody. Right now, we're not seeing. Are we seeing Strapi? No, right? That was your code.
Yeah. We're in the typer tool right now.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we haven't touched Strapi yet. I'm just showing you how this tool is integrated. So admin area and editing a lesson. Now I'm showing that the lesson that I updated, I'm in that lesson right now and starting to type that update that I just added there. So this is the full loop of how I was able to get Strapi into my system. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about code. One thing to note too is this, I have to be logged in. I've got route guards in here. So if I go to that URL and I'm not logged in, this is the page that you see. I'm not redirecting at the moment, but this is the route guard that's going in there. The rewrite that I was talking about, you use a new tool called Routify, which is a Svelte router that had the route guards and stuff that I needed in there. So I'll talk about that in a second. Any questions about the tool, the purpose, the history, and what I'm trying to do with it before I get into the code?
I think there's. If there's any questions, please interrupt me, guys. The chat was to do with things to do with conversation, and we could hear you okay. So
okay.
you kind of resolved that, so no problem at all. One of the things that I think you should show, and please excuse me, if there's any questions, please ask it, is where this information used to come from. Now it's coming from a Strapi. We're going to see that in a minute. Where did it used to come from?
So another tool that we've boasted about here is another one that I've created. Called Sample APIs. It's a RESTful endpoint tool for who are trying to learn what REST means, and it requires no authentication, and you have CRUD ability in this system. So Typer was coming from the sample APIs and this web lesson.
So you guys can see that it was essentially a JSON file. So he would have to edit the JSON file. There was new entries. It was a typo. He has to go and edit and then republish it through FTP, or it's a different way that he's doing it. And he no longer has to do that.
Yeah. So looking at the Strapi admin, we can talk about a couple of things before I get into the first thing that you'll notice when you get to Strapi, besides the welcome page, is that you immediately go over to the content types. The two content types that I've created is typing lessons and web lessons. They're largely the same because my data structure was built around it being the same, but I wanted them as separate endpoints. And if we look at the visual builder, title, difficulty, steps, I can add new fields if I wanted to. I can create a relation to something. It could be a list or a number field. There could be all sorts of things that I can do to that. And if we look at it, the validation that I was talking about, so this is the default base settings. If you wanted to check out the advanced settings, here's what I was talking about when I said the form validation, the field validation is there for you, and it's just a text box or a checkbox away. So default value, if there's a regex pattern, private, required, etc. So that this comes out of the box, and it's a very simple setup. That's what I want to stress here. It's a very simple setup.
Sorry, guys, we're getting the 10-minute warning again. Let's continue on, and if let's do this like one more time. If we get kicked out, just simply join meet.bocajs.org. Not right now, just when we get kicked out.
Very good. All right, and so roles and permissions. Now notice I have a users set up here, and I have a Jumbo with a type of creator, right? By default, you get authenticated in public, but what I did is I created a new role called creator, and this role is for creators. The description I gave it. By going into this particular role, anybody who is assigned as a creator, here's the web lessons and typing lessons that I can say this particular user can do. Can they, query for a count? Can they find one? Could they create, delete, or update? And that is all set by default. Strapi is secure by default. So just because I created the user does not necessarily mean they have permission to do things. So I had to go in here after I created the user, the role, and say what they had access to. So as I make more content types, by default, creator is not going to get permission to do anything to those. I have to come in here and do that. That is awesome. What else about this that I need to know? I created, gave him the role of creator, and that's it. So that's my admin setup. Database with some data because it's pulling from originally coming from the sample APIs. It was an easy copy and paste to get these in here. And now, how do I tie this all together? How does this look? You know what? Now might be a good time, Damien, to stop before we get into the code, so that way the code doesn't stop in a weird place.
Very good. So, team, if you don't mind, just go to meet.boca.js one more time. I'm going to kick you out. Go to meet.boca.js.com, and we will continue this conversation in just a couple of seconds.
The hood is a component-based library. The thing I really like about it is that it added enough just sprinkling of components and opinions to help build out the application that I needed. It's a compiler framework, meaning you don't ship the svelte code with bundle, like React and Vue and Angular, you have to download said frame and your code on top of that. Svelte does a good job separating what you write into just your JavaScript. Obviously, there's a little bit of boilerplate that needs to go into what Svelte needs to do to render, but it's rendering what you use. So it comes with store, animation, transitions, components, and you use what you ship what you use, which is pretty cool. This structure that we see here under source is my structure. This isn't like any predefined way of doing stuff. It just makes sense to me. The only exception to that is pages. The router I'm using is Routify, and under the hood, what it's trying to do is anything inside pages will be related to a page, in your website. So if I go to typer.com, I'm hitting this index page. If I go to typer.com/web lessons, I'm hitting that index page, typing lessons, etc. The cool thing about this is the square bracket lesson.svelte. That is Routify's way of being dynamic. So each lesson has a unique name or an ID. That is what I'm passing in the URL. That URL is being picked up and rendered in here.
That's amazing, but there can only be one per directory, right?
One square bracket lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's
then it figures out which
URL
one.
tray.
Could you do something? This I don't mean to interrupt, especially with the timing limit we have. Could you do like web, and then square brackets so that web 1, web 2, lesson 1, lesson 2?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
The documentation seemed to be pretty flexible with that, but this made the most sense to separate it because the URL is /typing-lessons, and then it would
Makes
render
sense.
the index. And then if I typing-lessons / intro to HTML, then that would render this lesson.svelte. So taking a small step backwards, the layout is kind of important. This is what is rendering all of the web pages that hit the main. I'm importing the nav component. So again, this is a component-based architecture, similar to React, Vue, Angular. So if you're familiar with that concept, it's all here. And the beauty of this too is that this is just an HTML file. The .svelte is a extension keyword for the compiler only, but this is just HTML where we have a script tag, we have some HTML, and if I were to have some style tag in here, it would just be a style tag. And by default, if the style tag that's in here is scoped to this component and it doesn't bleed up or down, so a child component instead of this particular one that has style, it doesn't bleed down. It stays with this component, and that's it. Fallback is for our 404 pages. So if you type in the URL wrong or something goes wrong, it goes back to this fallback Svelte file. Now, the reason why I point out the layout is because this is what is rendering this whole page right here. So when I'm in the admin page, I have another set of layout information that is only for this particular page. That's how I'm able to do route guarding on admin alone. So if we look at the admin page, notice I have an index page which you automatically hit, and this layout comes into play with the authentication portion. So as we're hitting anything inside of admin, it's inheriting this layout. And anytime that gets mounted, I am checking my store. If you're not logged in, go authenticate your user. And then that logic is what's sending you to the login page, which is taking care of the authentication. So if we take a quick look at get admin user, using the Axio post, because you have to post to this URL because you're sending information, your username and password. And you're getting information back. So if this passes, then you're a logged in, authenticated user. So log in, take care of that. If anything fails in here, a 401, a 404, 400, right? There's errors back in this data set that I can then display to the user and inform them what had went wrong. This is normal API stuff, and it's out of the box for free. So this API URL is my local host, 71337, and then the auth/local is how they handle local authorization. A quick side note about Strapi is they can handle local authentication as well, where you type in your username and password. Typically, integrate with Google, Twitter, OAuth, whatever you need. They're just a couple of clicks away, and you're good to go. I chose to go this route because this is for me and a very small group of people, the board of Code Palm Beach. So I didn't want to deal with all of that at the moment. Now, once we're logged in, I get access to go get information from the API. If we take a look at the content, the user roles, if I look at public, notice in public, I have a count, a find, and a find one. I can't create, read, update, and delete if I'm just a public user. So that means if I go to localhost 1337/web-lessons, this is new data that's coming from my Strapi and not the typer, the sample APIs anymore, which is cool. So this gives me the ability to find all lessons, gives me the ability to find one lesson if I want to go to a particular lesson, or if I wanted to find count, like how many lessons do I have? I have 6, right? So that's what I'm utilizing in my website over here. So as mentioned, Svelte has a global state management. They call it a store, and get webhooks actions, right? So when I'm trying to get the web lessons, I am trying, with async await, doing the try catch thing. I'm getting the API URL /web lessons. This gives me all the information I need. And then I set web, which is a global, that this is probably what people are listening to. And that set web lessons is what is that everybody is pulling the data from and listening to. So if we look at web lessons right here. So admin list is a component. It is very similar to typing lessons as it is web lessons. It's just a list of lessons and a button to click to say. So I am passing down a prop that is particularly of web lessons. This $ is a convention of Svelte that allows me to utilize this reactively. So if anytime something changes, this $ will automatically get that notification and re-render where necessary. A couple of cool things to mention about Routify is I can give them names and navigate to them by name. When I was first using this, I was doing things by path, and the more I rearranged my components, the more the pathing got messed up. So the .. and got out of hand really quickly. This is something I looked into earlier. One of the first things I should say, because I had to go back and undo a lot of my pathing, my go-to web lessons right here. This is that hard-coded name that I've given each individual page before I had to do something like .. / whatever. And that got out of hand as I was creating stuff. And then an individual lesson. I won't get into too much detail because it's pretty big. But essentially what's happening here is these items here in Svelte are reactive statements. So this is something Damien and I were working on the other day with form validation. How do I know that everything is filled out that the user needs? Yeah, the API will tell me, but how do I know, how do I give the feedback immediately to the user? So I've created a little form validation, and these $: is a way for Svelte to make its reactivity. If this changes, or this changes, or this changes, this, and wherever it's referenced, get it automatically. Right? Step errors. If I push or pop two step errors and anything inside of step errors changes, step errors changes, and all of the items that are reliant on that get changed as well. Right? So errors.title. If I have an error, if title is present, then I'm showing this if block, and all of this stuff happens automatically on the fly for me. What that looks like is, if I go to web lessons, add new lesson, right here, there's an error in there because title doesn't exist. But as I start typing, that goes away. Now I have a button called is valid, and notice I have a needs lesson steps here. Yes, I could use some help on the UI side of things. I'm worried about functionality at the moment. This isn't the most pleasing to look at. But now that I have a lesson, I still can't submit because the lesson itself doesn't have information I care about. What's the lesson description? What type is it? What are the lesson steps? And this one I think is pretty cool. It checks to see if a individual lesson is blank, because it's highly important for my typer tool to not have any missing lessons or spaces between lessons. That is a caveat that I had to create my own custom validation for. And I felt it was necessary to do it on the front versus the server side, so that way the user can't accidentally make that lesson.
What was a lot of fun also was the fact that you have a component. Each step is a component, and it's communicating back up to the main page, which then communicates back up to the button and decides whether the button should, well, the button itself decides whether it should be shown itself, but the components communicate to the page.
Yep. What he's talking about is I have my step errors, and then this children is ultimately what is making the button valid or not. So I'm checking to see if that step error, if any of its children has any errors. And the step child in here is HTML step, right? So this is Svelte's templating. It reminds me a lot of handlebars or mustache from back in the day. And this is a normal HTML component. And the beauty, that I got it to work just by thinking about how would I go about doing this, and I did something, and then it worked. The question I have is two-way data binding. Since I created my own custom components, right, HTML setup, how do I bind of the individual step without submitting or emailing listeners or tying something into some Vuex type of store? The answer is simply bind step, period, right? Because if this were a normal prop, I would pass it in there like this. But how do I get the information to pass to and from out of the box? This magical bind colon took care of all that for me. And oh man, that was a thing of beauty, because I'm typing, what would I do to do this? Like, I don't know. Let me try this. And it just worked. I felt that was amazing. Because the problem is, in my opinion, of how do I do all of this while I'm looping through something? Like, it kind of makes sense if it were one item, but that this step is not the array of steps. It's an individual item in the step. How do you keep track of that individual item in that array? Svelte takes care of all that stuff for me. And
so Veronica had an interesting question.
Yep.
Pardon me, Jeremy, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No
Veronica,
worries.
you want to ask that question here? Because it's relevant right here.
Yeah. Shoot, what's the question?
Well, I was asking, but it's not in this part. Was the last one that
You're right.
For the outroads, there's any like security that are using for the password, like bcrypt or something similar?
So I'm not a super expert in this yet. the connection, if you send it over HTTPS, I know is going to be encrypted because it is just a password field. But what they send back to you is a JWT token, and in that JWT token is all the information you care about, right? And you can modify what comes back in that JWT if it's sending back too much information. Right now, Damien and I were checking this the other day. It sends me back just my user ID, which in this case is 1. Right, because I'm the only user, so it sends back this, and then it sends back an expiration and a current timestamp. So another thing I got for free out of this was that expiration time frame. One of the concerns that I have is I'm storing this information currently in the Svelte store.
I think we lost you, Jeremy. You still talking? Hello?
No, I'm talking now.
Okay, now you are.
Cool. So this JWT token is what I'm ultimately sending back to authenticate myself from.
Yeah.
So to demonstrate what that is, I have, where'd you go? So update lesson, delete lesson, or add lesson. I'm posting to the web lessons. I'm passing in the lesson duplication, the actual lesson, and then I'm sending in headers with my bearer token, which is coming from the store admin user or localhost, because I did save things locally because I didn't want the user to log in, because the single page, as you refresh the page, you kind of lose your session. So I kind of wanted to keep something local so that way I didn't have to re-authenticate if you were within that window. But again, one of the things I got for free out of this was the expiration. So if that JWT refresh token was invalid, was expired, this forced you to re-log in. Like the authentication would come back to this particular add lesson and say your session is expired, and then I can then take that and then redirect them to a login page. So
you had a great question, Veronica, and actually Jeremy originally asked for that, and that's kind of things that we talked about. There's two parts. There is the fact that there is a problem here if we're passing back and forth essentially the ID, and the ID is a number, not a random number like a UUID. So that is a valid concern. Usually the passwords it's a business decision, and I would say that normally it's okay to pass a password as long as there's some requirements. I work for a medical company to do with audio, and so there's HIPAA requirements and all that, but usually with a password it's more with other things. So in this one, what your concern is, can you pretend to be a different user? Because of the what this product is and what you're doing with that user, heck, if some of the students are able to hack the system, I think that shows that we've trained some pretty good students.
Yeah,
but that was a good concern, good question.
No, thank you.
And with Strapi, if you're concerned about so if I were creating a blog, the example I watched a couple days ago about Strapi was, if I'm creating a blog and you're creating a post on that same blog, should I, as user A, have access to change user B's credential? If we're hitting the same blog, what's stopping me from changing your content? And there are things you can do in Strapi to intercept the request and then verify that the JWT, the authorized user ID, matches the ID of the post that's been created. So there are things you can do to expand that. And they give you the full flexibility to define what business are, and it gives you the scaffolding and structure to be able to expand pretty easily.
That answered my question, my concern with exactly what Veronica was bringing up, which was excellent. I think you've solved it, how you could make this as secure as possible.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is one of the areas that I mentioned earlier that it's like I'm historically not comfortable in because it's been difficult for me and I'm from scratch myself. But with Strapi, I feel more confident to dive into the topic and start modifying that and exploring that. What I'm focused on now is more feature enhancement of the typer and those things, because they are not so much for me right now, because as Damien mentioned, if our students can have it, we're doing our job. We're doing a good job.
Jeremy,
but
if I could just add,
Go ahead.
I was reading on the Strapi roadmap recently. You've got me really interested in this product, but
Cool.
that is actually on the roadmap. The users and the ability to not have one user affect another user's stuff. That's
Yeah.
high priority on the roadmap.
Yeah. And bring up a very, very good point, is that this is a very active developed product. They recently launched V3 of it, and there's a lot of things that users have been asking for. That is one of them. Another one that I'm personally looking for is being that this API system, an API generator based. I look at it.
Jeremy,
I
right
want
now you're
site.com.
being very robotic, except when it was like those 70s jokes. All we heard about was blah 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 blah, like this, like it's all, and all of a sudden you went suck.com, and I'm like, what? So let's do that again. Now that we can hear you better, Jeremy, can you repeat a couple of things you said?
Yeah. So as Charles was mentioning, this is a growing product, and they recently launched V3. One of the things that I'm particularly excited about is version of the APIs. When I create an API, I usually put it in a V1 or a V2 slash or prefix, so that I need to grow and need to completely change, I just migrate from api.com v1 slash my endpoint to api.com v2 slash my endpoint. And that's a way for me to grow that doesn't exist. And to Charles' point, the having one user affect another is something that is something that they're thinking about. So cool things happening about this product. Very cool. I think that is about it. I kind of want to wrap things up with Typer V3 and beyond. Kind of, I've explained where this is coming from, why I created it, some cool things about it, and I want to talk about Road to V3 is currently. There's a lot of possibilities, and Strapi has opened up a lot of possibilities and helped make features a lot more achievable and frictionless, right? With help of other community members, a big shout out to Damien and Enrique and Greg, he's not here. We got in on a Zoom call and hashed out what Road to V3. There's some things that I need to set the foundation for, and I'm going to open this up here relatively soon. Issues being created in GitHub, as well as a dev branch to branch from and merge in, so that way I don't affect what's currently live. Typer.codepalmbeach.org. That version is live, and I'm looking to enhance all these things. So if you're interested in contributing, please take a look at some of the issues and submit a pull request. It'd be very much appreciated. This is a great way to give back to the community. My spiel is typically about, give back in any way you can. If you want to help mentor a child, consider signing up at codepalmbeach.org and clicking the volunteer button. And since we're doing these things live, I should say virtual, there's no travel involved, and we can definitely use the help. But if you're not the type of person to have that one-on-one interaction, you don't feel like you're a teacher, please consider joining me on the game and contributing with some pull requests. To help facilitate a contribution, if there's enough interest, I can host a crash course and more in-depth application architecture to speed up contribution. Right. So if I get enough people interested in that, I will be more than happy teach them about the basics to get up and running and how this system is built. We can do good things together. Very cool. Well, thank you everybody for coming. listen to me rant. Sorry for having to stop and start again, but I appreciate everybody sticking through and coming back with us. Is there any questions?
And remember, the guys, that if you're muted, try to unmute yourselves. If you cannot, just type on the chat. I don't think I muted anybody, but if I did, I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. But thank you, Veronica, for joining us. Guys, please feel free to ask any questions if you do, or leave, and we'll see you next time. And by the way, just to remind everybody, we will not have these issues with Zoom next time. Something happened. Palm Beach Tech pays for all our Zoom contracts. Something seems to have happened with my email. That will be taken care of. It's been taken care of.
Addressed.
So please, any questions? Go for it.
I have kind of a general question about Strapi support, and if you know of any resources that may be available to us. I've really done a deep dive into this, and I've found that their documentation is lacking in kind of the content type builder area. You know, it doesn't really explain a whole lot of what you can do. It may be because I'm not a database guy, and so maybe I'm just not reading it the right way. But I've already kind of hit a roadblock, and I don't know who to reach out to.
There's a couple. How I found out about this was a random tweet talking about headless CMSs and the whole Jamstack, and Strapi's name was mentioned in there. And then, as if this guy reads my mind and produces content for it as soon as I think it, he had a crash course on YouTube about it. Has anybody heard of Traversy Media?
I watched it.
Boom. Okay. Well, then there's that. And then after watching Traversy Media, I found a Udemy course for $10 that I've been taking a deep dive into. Let me see if I can find it.
And I really enjoy it. I thank you for introducing this to us.
Yeah.
You're right, Charles. It was amazing. I remember when I first started hearing about it. So I was doing this sort of pro bono project, and I had already started the whole API endpoint and was starting on the front end. And I'm like, geez, I just wasted my time, because in a couple of minutes I could have had this done.
It's beautiful.
It is, absolutely. And they have a lot of free built-in stuff, with authentication, with all these things that make it so easy to instantly have users, instantly have a backend. I wanted to ask you, as you look for that, Jeremy, please don't let me interrupt you, but what is what was I going to build? It was there. Oh, crap. Yes. Could I use this just as the backend? I'm going to do a blog post. I'm going to do a regular website, and I'm going to pull the courses. And the teachers, they don't want to log into me, and I don't want to create a front end for the teachers. They can just log on to Strapi. Is there an option?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay. So you made the front. You made the editor for the web events. I'm sorry, the web lessons. Let's just say they were simpler than that, and they just had a name and a link or something. Would I be able to make a user on Strapi that logs on to the Strapi version, to the Strapi website? The admins part of the Strapi website.
Yes. So there's two separate.
There?
Yeah, there's two separate ideas, right? So you have an admin for the content area, right? The Strapi, the localhost at :1337, and that is a completely separate user login than I use to authenticate to the typer tool, right? The front end tool.
Right.
So yeah, there could be different use cases where you would either authenticate.
Could I use it in the? Although this site, I think it's a bad idea to think of it as a CMS. When I have WordPress, the beauty is that it makes the whole web page. I go to the backend web page, but also that I can give my 3 teachers a login to the backend of WordPress, and they can go in and put in the thing they're going to be teaching today without any help from me, the web developer.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the admin area. Yeah,
understood. So I could give them not only make an admin area on my website as you did with this, but give them a login to Strapi. I mean,
Yes. That's,
Strapi has its own admin on its own host, and it is a completely independent headless CMS. It's completely separated from what you choose to use on your front end.
and is there levels there? Is there a role saying teacher, don't touch the other things like all the other? Okay.
So just as the same way I'm consuming the lesson or the content types, I as a super admin can create users, and inside the user to log into the admin, I can say that this user has permission to do X, Y, and Z in there. I haven't dug too deep into that because the level of concern has been more on the admin area for Typer, like on the tool itself.
Yes.
But I believe you can.
You
Just
can.
like
Perfect. Thank you, Charles.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was my concern. At Norwegian Cruising, we had that. We had a sophisticated system, but some of the pages for the marketers were supposed to be edited for the marketers, and so we had essentially that headless CMS, which I never understood what it meant until I had this. So perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Veronica, I believe you had a question.
No, sorry. No, I'm listening. It's everything okay? No, thank you for the explanation. It was amazing. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
Thanks for posting that link. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
Yes, guys. So in the chat is a link that Charles talked about and that Jeremy mentioned. Just go ahead and check it out. I'll put some of these things. Let me go ahead and capture that. Some of these things we talked about in the comments on the YouTube page. Remember, you can always find YouTube at youtube.com/bokajs, and you'll be able to see this video. And we won't have these problems. You can see all the other videos. So it's my proof that we won't have these problems by seeing the other videos. And just continue. We have a couple of minutes left. If you have any questions, go.
All right, one last thing I'd like to mention is, you guys see my passion for this particular tool, and the best way to learn something is to teach it, and not only does teaching something force you to dive deeper into a particular topic, but it also people ask questions that I don't necessarily think of, and it forces me to reframe and rethink how I view that particular topic. So community, whatever it is you're learning right now, come give a talk on it, right? Boka.js or Palm Beach.js, Palm Beach JavaScript, we're always looking for speakers, and this is a community for you guys. And as you see, you don't need to be an expert to come talk about something, right? I discovered a month ago now, and I'm here talking about it, and how impactful it has been to what I've trying to accomplish, and I've been able to inspire other individuals to rethink how they're using something, or illuminating a new technology to their field and something that it might use in the future. So I know there's a couple of students on here or recent boot camp grads. I've had students come talk at the meetup, and I've had industry, from all over, from Twitter to Facebook to wherever, come talk at these events. And with the help of Damien, we try to organize bigger talks, but this is a local community first. So please consider contributing to the community by giving a talk about whatever it is you're excited about. The reason why we chose JavaScript as a topic, because it's a very wide topic. You can talk about anything front-end related. You can talk about back-end specific items. You can talk about something Internet of Things or robotics. The topics are boundless here, and there's no limitation. And that's why we chose JavaScript to talk about that. So again, reach out to Damien or myself if you're interested in giving a talk. We can help mentor you as far as how to talk, what to talk about, and tools of the trade that we use. So don't let that be a barrier if that is a barrier for you. And look for us next month. We got a couple cool things coming up. I know Boka.js has Todd presenting again, another game dev one. He's shaking.
Sorry, so you abuse the fact that I was on mute. So let's see what the next one is. But we have because of the fact that we're online, we have both Palm Beach JavaScript, that group, and Boka.js. we'll have both of the events. The next one is one by Rick. And he will be, oh my God. He'll be doing something, trust me. Anyways,
I got a
come join
description
us.
for you if
Yes.
I haven't posted it yet. But yeah, so we got Todd coming up. We got Rick Blaylock coming up. He's done a couple of talks before on React, and he's a super smart guy. Definitely want to check him out. And recently I've been contacted by someone who's not a part of our group, wanting to talk about a React product that they're building that you guys might find useful, a React UI building tool. I just found out about it today, so I'm not sure about what the details are, but there's a lot of cool things coming up. Don't feel like you need to be that expert, that 20-year veteran to come out and talk to these things. So thanks for coming out, and hope to catch you guys next time.
See ya.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
And
guys.
then Jeremy
Have a
and
good
Damon,
night.
you guys are great as usual.
Thank you
All
very
right,
Thank you,
much.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Peace.
Peace.